My heart hurts. I think the ending to Arcane Season 2 Episode 6 is one of the most beautiful, heart-wrenching moments of television I can think of. I watched that scene again just now and I cried. Yep, today we're going to focus on episode 6, the good and the bad, but as a whole I want to make a defence for it. I've seen a lot of criticisms levied at this episode especially. There are generally some mixed reactions to Act 2. I think most of them positive, but some people feel it's hindered by pacing problems, some people struggle to feel invested in the characters, others are absolutely trashing this as an act they want to pretend didn't happen. I find that really extreme. But I argued last video pacing wasn't the problem. A lot of people saying it's too rushed. No. Season 1 had a very fast pace. The pace itself is never an issue so long as the reader or the audience can feel like they're keeping up with that. You know, making sure they can follow that doesn't come down to the speed itself, it comes down to how clearly the story can set out defined character beats that lead to those moments of change. Last video I talked about that in relation to episode 5, but I neglected to mention Caitlyn. When I said the problems weren't about pacing, a lot of people commented, well, what about Caitlyn? She's the biggest problem, surely. Act 1 had her establishing herself as something of a ruthless dictator, now she's suddenly siding with Vi again? Turning against Ambessa? What? Well, yes, it's definitely something we need to discuss, and it's definitely not as simple as that makes it sound. Here are my thoughts. Caitlyn's arc across this season I do think makes more sense upon a rewatch. I do think on a logical level it works. That's not to absolve it of all criticism, but it is an important step here. She lost her mother because of Jinx. She saw Council get obliterated right at the point it was voting for peace. She saw chaos and destruction and an almost inevitable escalation of war caused by Jinx. That's her view, and she has always been quite a regimented, rigid, black and white figure. It's unsurprising how very focused she becomes on catching and killing Jinx. That's like her mission. Having a clear mission spares her from the more complicated doubts and bigger uncertainties and all the dangerous muddle of politics. She is a soldier, not a politician, and the mission almost works. This thing she's pinned all hopes on until Vi, of all people, turns against her, prevents Caitlyn, so Caitlyn lashes out and leaves, and then Ambessa steps in to fill that hole. Also somewhat filling the mother role. In order to make use of Caitlyn politically, she becomes a general under a time of martial law. They go to war, it fuels this big Jinxer rebellion, and so we see Caitlyn getting more and more boxed in and suffocated by her quest for Jinx, a quest that continues to elude her. What's more, she's very lonely. We see her connect with Maddie to try and fill the hole left by Vi, but it's not a close connection. The whole scene is literally Maddie trying to get close and Caitlyn drawing back. Something is wrong. She has clear doubts about Ambessa, but at the same time, Ambessa has largely quelled the uprising in Zorn, so she's good? Maybe? Caitlyn isn't sure, and even makes comment that she doesn't trust her.
You don't trust me.
The blade cuts both ways. Why is peace always the justification for violence?
They both band together around the idea of Vander though, or I suppose Warwick. They both want to hunt him. Caitlyn because she thinks it's an awful, terrible abomination wreaking untold destruction, like some weapon to be banned by the Geneva Convention, and Ambessa wants Vander to utilise for her own ends. And yeah, Singed just thinks he's the key to resurrecting his daughter. So they go hunting, and then she bumps into good old Vi. Caitlyn explains they're hunting some awful Chembaran weapon, and Vi says, no, that's my dad, we've brought him down here to try and save him. And that's the point. Caitlyn, who lost her mother, now sees Vi trying to save her father, which also seems a better option than either killing him or risking Ambessa utilising him for more destruction. This also coming right off the bat of a scene with Ambessa where she talks all about sacrifice, how it gives a person strength, almost glorifying it in a way that I think does make Caitlyn uneasy, because losing Cassandra wasn't a good thing. Maybe it does harden your heart depending on the situation, maybe it does give you resolve, but it's also grief. I think this highlights a difference between them, just as we see this philosophical reluctance about using brute force.
Your speed is improving, but eventually you need force.
Too much force exposes you to risk.
And so then when she meets Vi, rather than following a path of essentially sacrificing Vander for the sake of conflict, she chooses to risk saving him for the sake of family, love, life, humanity, all the things Victor talks about with his commune. The theme of sacrifice is something we'll talk about a bit more in a moment, but she's not siding with the Zornites, I don't think. This commune is something very different to that fight, and she doesn't realise Jinx is there. When she does realise, Victor's death interrupts anything and all hell breaks loose, and there isn't really time for her to be picking sides here. I hope she'll still have a lot of differences to hash out with Vi and Jinx that might set them apart again. I don't think she's let everything go, but I do think she has always been uneasy about Ambessa's path of sacrifice and all-out war. So, functionally, it does work when you think about it. Caitlyn's change isn't completely jarring, but at the same time you don't really feel the development. You don't feel like you're moving with the story here, it's more something that happens and takes you aback. And partly that's because all of Act 2 was one no one was expecting. We thought things were gearing up to a Zornite war. Suddenly we veered down a route of Vander and hopes of peace, and that does challenge our expectations. That's not a bad thing.
What's the matter, guys? Too challenging for you?
But at the same time, I do think the show could have made the character beats clearer here. Kind of like what I said last video, more could be done in this scene, I think, to establish Caitlyn is questioning Ambessa's perspective. We don't see much even in her expressions to suggest that. There's no outright conflict in the dialogue. If we're pushing it, maybe we could include some callbacks to what Caitlyn said in episode 4, just to kind of re-establish before this change what Caitlyn is feeling. And if we were pushing it even more, I think don't cut this scene right where Vi explains she's trying to save her dad.
Trying to save my dad.
I think add a few extra lines to emphasise clearly that this chem weapon you're hunting needs not be a weapon, Caitlyn. This can all be avoided, he can be changed. The Caitlyn I knew believed in that. Have Vi kind of try and persuade in that way. And you can then cut the scene with Caitlyn pointing out that they tried that with Jinx. Vi once insisted she could be changed before she blew a hole in the council. Cutting it there instead, that still leaves the twist betrayal feeling like a surprise, but we've also better established why it might happen. We've added 2 beats in here, a setup where Caitlyn is questioning Ambessa again, re-establishing that in our minds, a second where there is some conflict, a clear choice to be made, and thirdly the payoff where we see the decision that has been made. That's like my very basic example. It's not to say these tweaks are good or the right ones, it's just an example to explain that the problem isn't the pace itself. I've not really made the story at all slower there. Caitlyn is still making such a big change in a small time frame. I've just better emphasised what Caitlyn is feeling. Theoretically at least, I think that would stop it from feeling as rushed. I should add as well though, we do still need consequences for past actions. I think that is also a reason this can feel jarring for some people. Caitlyn can't go to war with half of Zorn and then just be let off because she chose to help Vi in a single instance. Vi can't be let off her part in unleashing the Grey just because Jinx made a few snide remarks about it. Jinx can't be let off the whole bomb thing just because it was an entire season ago now. These conflicts do still need picking apart and still need consequences. However, there is still time for that to happen. It feels weird at the moment not to get any of that yet, but it might feel differently once we have the entire season. I hope. A, we will find out soon, and B, this act has had a different focus, something that I do want to big up. So, what do I mean? Okay, before we move on, I just want to say this because I haven't said it enough. I've got a second channel on YouTube now, made with my fiancée Kirsty. We go to the cinema to watch several films each weekend and we talk about them on there. We rank all of the films we've seen this year in a big list. We make videos about our house rabbits or just, I don't know, whatever. A tier list about Baldur's Gate 3 characters. It's where we put stuff I can't easily fit onto my main channel. I got Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed.
Well, this is a clear winner.
Yeah.
I am hooked, but I know the end.
You're not
so
hooked on Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed.
I watched it every day for like 2 or 3 years.
It's not a gripping film, though,
Yes.
is it? It's not like A Fugitive where you're on the edge of your seat.
No,
it
on the
isn't.
edge of my
No, it
seat the
isn't.
entire time.
No, you're not.
Yes.
You're lying down in bed when you're watching it. I've seen you. If that happens to interest you at all, there's a link down below. We could do with a few more subscribers there, and if not, well, yeah, I've finished talking about it now. Let's move on. Act 2 is essentially all about escape. It began with a Jinx who was avoiding the world, starting to embrace the role of hero, gearing up to energize a rebellion, but then finding Vander, reuniting with Vi, and the two of them quietly hanging out in a commune before everything goes wrong. On the one hand, that is a weird and surprising change. Jinx starts moving in one direction and then seemingly veers off in another. But at the same time, what did Jinx want in season 1? She wanted her family. She wanted a big fancy dinner with Vi and Silco and Clagor and Milo. She wanted love, connection, for things to go back to the way they were before everything went wrong, but that wasn't possible there. Partly because Vi didn't understand Jinx as she had become, and Jinx didn't understand this changed Vi. She also felt threatened by Caitlyn. Tragically, the reunion wasn't as rosy as they both hoped it would be. But season 2 pairs Jinx with Isha, and she does start to better understand that older sibling role. I think it makes her yearn for Vi all over again. As season 1 Jinx lamented,
But you changed too.
but maybe now she can understand that change. And similarly, can Vi start to understand Jinx? Yes, in short. I've talked about this in past videos. Both of them wanted to bring their family together. And now, with the mention of Vander being alive, both of them hope it is possible this time. They dream it's possible. They dream they can just put all their differences aside and go back to childhood. I absolutely adore this montage of Victor reaching Vander's psyche. This is everything they're all wishing for. Both sisters would give up anything just to go back to that, to a time before they both felt so lost. Yes, it's within Vander's mind we're seeing these scenes play out, but the sequence directly has us draw out of this montage into Vi and Caitlyn looking here. So it does express that these are ideas they're feeling as well. That is what they want, but it is just a dream. That's the tragedy. You can reunite, you can work things out, but you can't just wishfully drop all differences as though they were never there. You can't just go back in time. And you can get this very nice hug between the family, but at the end of the day, Caitlyn still has serious issues with Jinx. Jinx and Vi still have differences. Noxians are still at the gate. Jace is still approaching. Isha is still idolizing Jinx in ways that are detrimental. And Vander. This is where the metaphor of Vander is so powerful, trying to free the warm, loving man from this ferocious beast. You know, the beast is the whole reason Vander is still alive. And I don't just mean literally these wolves, I mean the wolf-like side of him as a person too. Singed makes it quite clear that Vander's rage, his will to fight death, his fierce determination to find his daughters is what kept him alive. That Singed wouldn't have made this scientific progress were it not for Vander specifically. It's not so much Singed's scientific brilliance, but Vander himself who is scientifically special.
He had a ferocious will to live. With him, I was able to make strides impossible with any other specimen.
In that sense, the very thing that keeps him alive is also the very thing to be feared. I think that's why this moment with the old letter matters. It makes it clear that Vander fell into a rage when Felicia died. We don't know the specifics, but he lost it, and he tried to kill Silco, and he deeply regrets that. The wolf overcame him there, and so he then spent the rest of his life trying to quell that side, and trying to hold fast to peace until violence overwhelmed everything. And we're kind of seeing a repeat of that. This whole act is kind of a tragic exploration of history repeating itself. The attempts to escape humanity's worst aspects proving tragically impossible because, as Victor says, it's all two sides of the same coin.
Rage, compassion, two sides of the same coin.
All of this was a dream, all of the commune, all of the family. A beautiful dream that, from a literary perspective, was always going to fall apart, and it will probably leave us with absolute chaos for Act 3. But also I think Victor was right. It is worth the risk.
He is worth the risk.
And then we get Isha. You know what makes me cry about this scene? It's the music. It's the fact the music isn't sad music, as you'd often expect, but it's joyous, it's explosively loving and triumphant. We see Isha running, while at the same time having sugary, painted visions of herself soaring the sky alongside Jinx, running like children in a game. It's so tragic because it is all such a warm and loving act. Isha is smiling as she gives her life. She makes the finger guns as though it were all as simple and innocent as that. You know, this is the other side of sacrifice, not some glorious experience that happens to you, the sacrifice of losing someone you love to strengthen your heart in all the ways Ambessa is suggesting, but an act of someone else sacrificing themselves done with love, the way both Vander and Vi tried to in season 1. It's tragic because it's loving. Like Powder in season 1, Isha just wants to help, and on a logical level, she understands what she's doing in a way Powder didn't understand what her bomb would do. Isha knows exactly what she is sacrificing, but on a deeper level, I don't think she grasps the reality of this. She has seen Jinx as a sister, but also as a hero, an idealised, not quite real hero that Isha is attempting to emulate. For so many scenes, she has been an innocent child putting on the appearance of a larger-than-life hero, doing this in ways that Jinx hasn't picked up on and hasn't spoken to her about. It's just kept happening, and now to such an extent that it takes her life, and that's just... it's heartbreaking. Yes, this is heroic in a way, and it is done with love, but it's also horrific and tragic in ways Isha has been unable to fully recognise because she too is lost in a dream, at an age where she can't tell the difference. It doesn't just hurt because of Isha herself, but also for what this entire episode means thematically, the love and rage of humanity. This episode is Arcane at its most poetic. This is its clearest exploration of humanity we've had yet, and sure, there are some flaws with how it's executed. I've made mention of Caitlyn. My defense for her is somewhat lukewarm. It could definitely have been executed better. I'm also slightly disappointed we never see Jinx and Vi hashing things out in this episode, you know, deeper arguments between them, or attempts at apologies, or even just much more clearly showing us two people consciously, desperately choosing to try and dismiss everything that divides them. I mentioned Chase and Mel in my last video. I do think we can criticise Act 2 much more than any other act in all of Arcane so far, but goddamn, what about the stuff that works? These minor flaws are worth it for all of the ways this succeeds. Arcane has been gripping, probably more gripping, more emotionally impactful and tragic in all sorts of moments in the past, but never as thematically striking as it is here, and I love it. That's my video, I love it. Comment your thoughts, like this video if you liked it, subscribe, support me on Patreon, buy me a coffee, check out my second channel, whatever you fancy doing, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Grace, Kellyanne Davidson, Luke Orr, Michael Gallagher, Chad Bramwell and Joshua C. Follier. Thank you.